Okay, let's start. I hope I am a decent volume and you can actually hear me, unlike last time. I streamed for like 20 minutes before realizing that no one could actually hear me. So that wasn't fun. And okay. Okay. So, I think most of us can agree that the Starship presentation wasn't really that great. I haven't seen this video, by the way. This is the one I'm going to be watching. So I haven't seen it yet. So I guess it's a blind react. I haven't got anyone talking with me at the moment, but I may down the line. So yeah, uh, let's get it loaded up, and then I'll make a preemptive statement. Let's read the description. It's always fun. Oh, okay, that's boring. Um, hello, chat. How is everybody? And I think Streamlabs is working. Okay, yeah. So the Starship presentation, my thoughts on it. I actually didn't finish watching it because I found it quite boring. There was a lot of talk of just spreading the light of consciousness, and I'm not really about that. That's not why I want space exploration. I'm more in it for the science. Like I will go through sometimes. This is a little embarrassing. Sometimes when I'm very bored, I'll go through this Twitter account, this Mars image mission bot, and I will just look at the rocks because I'm that much of a fucking loser. Anyway, it's interesting. My partner is a sedimentary geologist, so yeah, I did have high hopes for it, but it obviously wasn't aimed at people like me. Like I wanted details on like life support systems and interior stuff. Yeah, the stuff at the beginning was probably the weaker part of it. The Q and yeah, if you were curious about Raptor 2, this was perfect because Raptor 2 was the only thing we really got new information about. The rest we kind of we anyone who follows it kind of already knew most of it. Okay, when did I post the tweet? Okay, I'll give it another minute and then we will start the video. It did feel aimed at investors, or like it felt aimed at like the people who are there, the crypto to the moon dudes who aren't hugely into the technology. But I'm glad I don't have to watch the whole 2 hour presentation again. This one's only an hour, and let's be honest, if the video is not at least an hour and a half, is it really worth watching? I was also really disappointed to see Space Eccentric there as well. Um, Maybe I'll watch his communism video later. We'll see. I'll see how I go. Okay, let's start. I'll try and remain quiet.
Welcome to this episode of The Common Sense Skeptic, which is going to dive as deeply as possible into a...
Okay, just to be annoying. Yes, I was very pleased with the Polaris announcement. I kind of wish that was at the same time as the Starship thing. Anyway, this is the first video Common Sense Skeptic has made on SpaceX in quite a while. On the, I guess you could call it the technical stuff, because the other stuff is this, the regulatory stuff and the versus FAA, the legal stuff. So it'd probably be 6-7 months ago when he did the Starlink one. This was full of kind of technical stuff. This was when he, you know, edited the article.
This is a graphic
That was funny.
satellites being in a
Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Okay. So yeah, for his first, what I'm trying to say is I'm curious to see if they've tried to educate themselves.
a very shallow update from Elon Musk regarding Starship that was over 2 years in the making. The last such presentation of this sort was in September of 2019, when Musk presented the very first mock-up of a Starship in Boca Chica to a cheering crowd. Apparently, not a lot has changed in the past 30 months. In fact, not even the speech he made to the crowd in attendance. Compare the talking points and buzzwords from February 10th, 2022 to his previous speech from September 29th of 2019.
So it's been almost 2 years since our last update, and a lot has happened since then.
Earth's been around for about 4.5 billion years, although it was mostly molten magma for about 500 million years.
This is the first point in the 4.5 billion year history of Earth that it has been possible.
The sun will expand and it will overheat the Earth.
Eventually, the sun will expand and destroy all life.
There are many troubles in the world, of course, and these are important and we need to solve them. But we also need things that make us excited to be alive, that make us glad to wake up in the morning.
Life can't just be about solving problems. There have to be things that inspire you, that move your heart, that make you glad to be, when you wake up in the morning, you're excited about the future.
I'm pretty optimistic by nature, but there's some chance that window will not be open for long.
Now, I'm naturally an optimist, so I think the probability of that is low, but it is not zero.
And I have great respect for anyone who makes it to orbit. That is a hard thing.
It's insanely difficult. I have huge respect for anyone who's gotten a rocket to orbit. It's so hard.
But the critical thing that we need to focus on, I think, is the fastest path to a self-sustaining city on Mars.
The critical threshold, I think, for Mars is to have a city that is self-sustaining.
The critical breakthrough that's necessary is a rapidly reusable orbital rocket. This is basically the holy grail of space.
The holy grail breakthrough that's needed is a rapid and completely reusable rocket system.
So it's actually harder to dock with the space station than it is to do orbital refilling.
And it's actually way harder to dock with the space station than to dock with yourself.
3.5 tons of oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel.
3.5 tons of oxygen for every 1 ton of fuel.
Around a 7,500 ton force rocket, which is about twice the thrust of a Saturn V.
So it's more than twice the thrust of a Saturn V, which was...
So I guess you could criticize the fact that some lines are like word for word, but in general, if you're just explaining the overall structure and mission profile, it hasn't changed that much in 2 years. Like certain small details like propellant number and Raptor 2 numbers have changed, but as a whole the mission profile hasn't changed too much. So I guess it's fine repeating that if you're trying to talk to those who don't know what the mission profile is, who are new, I guess. And like repeating, the sun will still ultimately extinguish life. I didn't think that'd change in 2 years.
That's the largest rocket ever to get to orbit.
Starship. It's about 50 meters, so 165 feet or so. But in terms of its usefulness, it'll be able to do about 150 tons with full reusability.
I'm not a huge combustion chamber nut, but what's the difference in pressure between Raptor 1 and Raptor 2? Because Raptor 2, I think, was what, over like 300 bar? I could be wrong. They did leave that out, yeah, but I do remember explicitly Musk saying like our main problem right now is melting the combustion chamber. So yeah, that's what this is, engine-rich exhaust. So I wouldn't say they left it out entirely. They're definitely not sugarcoating. They're not. I don't think they're saying it's ready. Yeah, so that's a difference of 60 bar.
I think we should really do our very best to become a multi-planet species and to extend consciousness beyond Earth. And we should do it now.
We need to seize the opportunity and do it as quickly as possible. Let's make this real. Cool.
So you get the idea. Easily 90% of the speech was recycled material from the 2019 presentation, or gleaned off of the rarely updated SpaceX website, or taken directly from the 6-page user's guide for Starship that's 2 years old. There were only a couple of points in this presentation that were new, with an updated animation that we'll take note of before the Q&A portion of the evening started. Now, this channel has been looking at Starship, its dimensions and expected limitations for almost 2 years. And we were really looking forward to seeing the presentation that Musk promised in October of 2020 so that we had new material to work with. But of course, that never happened. We wanted to see what the interior of this was proposed to look like, layout of the ship, crew quarters,
No name, my child.
number, and we wanted this for 2 reasons. The first, to rework our calculations per crew member in light of new information, and second, to silence the fanboys who enjoy making up excuses for Musk by pulling numbers out of thin air and spending their time creating unworkable fanboy artwork. Some of those debates will have to be postponed for a little while longer, because Musk's presentation on February 10th provided no new...
Okay, side note, what is this quality? It's ass quality. It did provide new information, it was just not information that I would have liked. Like, the Raptor 2 stuff was cool, but you could have swapped it to a Raptor update, honestly.
Information, floor plans, layouts, or even crew count. However, Musk did mention a couple numbers and stats we can pick apart, so let's get to it. Let's begin with what Musk said about shipping materials to Mars. 1 million tons of payload.
And I think maybe roughly you need about 1 million tons on Mars to have a self-sustaining city. Starship is capable of doing that. It's capable of getting 1 million tons to the surface of Mars and creating a self-sustaining city. And I think we should try to do that as soon as we can.
This is what Musk says SpaceX needs to deliver to Mars in order to create a self-sustaining city, one completely independent of Earth. The city we'll come back to, but for now, let's just deal with the 1 million ton claim. He doesn't break down what they're carrying to Mars, it's just that they need 1 million tons of stuff. Starship's payload capacity was advertised by Musk in this presentation as 150 tons to LEO and 100 tons to higher orbits. Assuming that to be true, he will need 10,000 starships carrying cargo to Mars to build.
I believe the 150 tons was with refueling. I could be wrong though. I don't know the numbers off the back of my what am I trying to say? You know what I mean. Fuck you.
Build that city. Those 10,000 starships will require, depending on who you talk to and who you believe, anywhere from 6 to 12 tanker launches per vehicle, giving a total count, just for cargo ships, between 70,000 and 130,000 vehicle launches, assuming all these vehicles get to orbit safely.
Mic volume is high and video volume is low. Okay, I should be able to adjust that. Actually, no, you're absolutely right.
And we haven't started bringing people.
That seems a bit better. No, you're right. I had the gain way low on Streamlabs. Thank you for pointing that out.
Or groceries or water yet. Let's do a little thought experiment here to put 1,000,000 tons of stuff into some perspective. We'll assume that the 1,000,000 tons of material is going to be construction materials, things like the glass in the dome that can't be processed on Mars. Steel, aluminum, plumbing pipe, electrical conduit, that kind of thing. Of course, everything that is brought along will have to weigh less than the operating limits and specifications of the cable crane lowering everything 30 meters down the craft to the surface. And whatever they are loading or unloading will have to fit on that platform and squeeze through that hatch. To illustrate the amount of material Musk is talking about, we'll use a well-known landmark to run the numbers, the Empire State Building. Pretty much every stat about this building is easily accessible if you want to run your own numbers. The mass of the building, just the empty building, no furniture, amenities, or people, weighs 365,000 imperial tons, or 331,000 metric tons. So to get to 1,000,000 tons, you'll need 3 of them. Each of these 3 buildings has a volume of 37 million cubic feet, or a little over 1,000,000 cubic meters, and 15,000 people work in each one. Broken down into volume per person, that's 2,467 cubic feet, or 69.8 cubic meters per person. Assuming an 8-foot ceiling per floor, that becomes a 300 square foot, or around 28 square meter area per person, which is in line with what they call a spacious office area standard, a large private office typical of a law firm. Comparing that to NASA's minimal habitable volume per person for spacecraft at 25 cubic meters per, the Empire State Building is almost 3 times as generous. From there, we can state that based on these numbers, with 3 buildings, each holding 15,000 people, and taking into account the ratio between NASA's number and the office space in the building, that this 1,000,000-ton structure built with materials brought from Earth could house, maximum, 125,640 people, each with a 100 square foot or 9 square meter living space. And of course, even this number is ridiculous on its face because we haven't considered any other logistics to this construction or structure. We haven't included things like whatever...
Okay, I don't think I need to point this out, but it is a silly thought experiment. If you're using buildings from Earth that were built in, the previous century in Earth gravity, but I don't want to take this too seriously because it's a thought experiment. We're not landing Empire State Buildings. But yeah, the thing with the hatch, this is obviously the HLS Starship.
At the center of what appears to be a field of individual habitats is a large glass dome, inside of which looks to be park space and trees. Honestly, the previous CGI city he published for presentation looked much more plausible, with smaller connected domes and greenhouses. This version has houses dotted all over the landscape, even up the hillside, and a fair distance from other habitats. Without interconnecting walkways, that becomes a distance you would have to walk in an EVA suit. No mention during this presentation about who these travelers on the ship were going to be, where they might be trained, what they might be doing on Mars. However, he had a sales pitch ready for those who might be interested in going.
The sales pitch for going to Mars is that it's going to be cramped, dangerous, difficult, very hard work. You might die, and that's the sales pitch. I hope you like it.
Sounds like fun. Where do we sign up?
Okay. It's honest. At least what he said was honest. That was I think that was only to address the argument that billionaires are going to escape to Mars or something. If billionaires wanted to escape, they would literally go to New Zealand like they have been. Yeah, here we go. Bam. That's where they would go if they were worried about the apocalypse.
Musk walks us through the concept, but not the process of orbital refilling. Our own Starship episode...
That is the point of renders, really. It's about the concept. You're not meant to take it entirely literally. And yeah, like June says in the chat, as soon as I saw the launch and entry suits in the presentation, I immediately thought, man, I can't wait for CSS to take this way too literally. Which is true. Like, if I wanted to nitpick, I would say, oh, they don't have life support backpacks or any visible connections. Where are they getting their oxygen and cooling and other life support from? So you can spend all day and all night nitpicking renders, but they're relatively easy problems to think for. Like,
tomorrow.
Yeah, the sales pitch ready for those who might be.
And that's the sales pitch. I hope you like it.
Sounds like fun. Where do we sign up? Musk walks us through the concept, but not the process of orbital refilling. Our own Starship Episode 5 dealt with orbital refilling as originally proposed by Musk in the aft-to-aft configuration and disassembled it claim by claim. This older episode of ours took a lot.
Disassembled it claim by claim. Yeah, no.
Of heat, accusing us of calling SpaceX engineers behind this paradigm idiots, which we didn't actually do. How would some random YouTuber possibly know better than the geniuses that work for SpaceX? After all, NASA gave SpaceX a $53 million contract based off of that system design. Are we also calling NASA a bunch of nitwits? Well guys, all we're going to say is that after NASA gave SpaceX that contract, they completely changed the system. And this is what they're going with now. Side-by-side coupling of two giant cylindrical craft while moving 27,000 kilometers per hour in orbit, transferring 100 up to possibly...
Okay. Why would he mention
27,000 kilometers?
Why does he mention orbital? Why does he mention orbital speed here?
Of two giant cylindrical craft while moving 27,000 kilometers per hour in orbit, transferring 100 up to possibly 200 tons of propellant and oxidizer, before another 5 to 11 ships line up to repeat the procedure over and over and over again in a process that will likely take weeks or possibly months. And no, we don't think this paradigm is going to work any better.
Why? Like, I agree for specifically for the moon, orbital refueling is probably not the best, though 2 out of the 3 HLS proposals did require orbital refilling. Sorry, I'm used to calling it refueling. It doesn't really fucking matter, does it?
The only major component of the launch system that Musk didn't go through in 2019, because it did not exist yet, was the giant launch tower, which Musk refers to as Stage 0 in the launch system equipment. And he defines it as a launch tower, which it very obviously is.
Like I said, the tower and the launch system, which I call Stage 0, is just as important as Stage 1 and Stage 2.
However, in May of 2021, when the FAA warned Musk that this tower was not approved and that it would complicate the environmental approval process that is still ongoing as of February 2022, SpaceX wrote back, saying it did not believe the review was necessary because it only intends to use the integration tower for production, research, and development purposes and not for FAA licensed or permitted launches. Yet here we are, with that same environmental review process still underway, and Musk is now calling the structure in question Stage 0 of the Starship launch system.
It's both. They use it for both.
Around the middle of the presentation, Musk outlines the mission architecture for Starship and for Super Heavy. Here are the claims.
The ship is probably reusable about every 6 to 8 hours. That's why we say sort of 3 times a day for the ship. And in theory, the booster is capable of being reused every hour. Propellant pumps are designed to fill the rocket in about half an hour.
So to recap,
in theory, the booster is capable of being reused every hour. Propellant pumps are designed to fill the rocket in about...
So I'm guessing that 1 hour figure is just the pad, fuel, launch, and then boost back, landing on the arms, back on the pad, and then refilling time, because he did say theoretically, which I think is very important, because common sense skeptic is going to take it as Musk said this will happen, rather than Musk said this could happen.
About half an hour.
So to recap, the Starship will be able to be reused 3 times per day. The booster will be able to fly once per hour.
Will be, yeah, no, there you go. I was completely fucking right.
What are the claims?
The ship is probably reusable about every 6 to 8 hours. That's why we say sort of 3 times a day for the ship. And in theory, the booster is capable of being reused every hour. Propellant pumps are designed to fill the rocket in about half an hour.
So to recap, the Starship will be able to be...
The graphic is right. Can. And also the fucking capitalization of the ship. Oh my god, dude.
Reused 3 times per day. The booster will be able to fly once per hour. The cryogenic refilling pumps attached to the ship and booster while on the pad will be able to refill an empty craft in 30 minutes. Let's start with the last one. Liquid methane weighs 424 kilograms per cubic meter. Liquid oxygen weighs almost 3 times that at 1141 kilograms per cubic meter, so it's heavier than water, as you'd expect because the lighter hydrogen molecules in water are not taking up space. The Starship booster holds 3,600 tons of propellant, broken down into 20...
Again, okay, no, I do feel like this is nitpicking, but it's not so much taking up space, it's just existing. It's added mass, like...
taking up space. The Starship booster holds 3,600 tons of propellant, broken down into 2,800 tons of liquid oxygen, and...
I may just double check that, because it might be more. Let's go to my video. Starship. 3,700 metric tons in... Yes, okay, yeah, 3,700 metric tons. Wait, okay, no, that's wrong. The 3,700 ton figure is from the FAA website, so I used that in my video because I thought that would be more reliable than... I did not even check Wikipedia. Yeah.
800 tons of liquid methane. 800 tons of liquid methane has a volume of 1,886.79 cubic meters. 2,800 tons of liquid oxygen has a volume of 2,000...
Wait. No, I seem to be misremembering here. Because I thought he said that the booster... Oh, sorry, no, that the full stack actually contained 4,600 tons.
4,600 tons of propellant is 4.6...
Yeah, methane, look. So wait, was he wrong? I'm guessing... Oh no.
186.79 cubic meters. 2,800 tons of liquid oxygen has a volume of 2,453 cubic meters. We'll assume that each liquid oxygen and methane tank on both stages of this vehicle are getting their own refilling pumping station dedicated to them, and we'll concentrate on what it would take to fill the largest reservoir, the liquid oxygen on Super Heavy. In comparison to the Space Shuttle Complete Assembly, weighing 2,000 tons, the liquid oxygen tank of the Super Heavy booster alone is 40% heavier, and the liquid oxygen tank of the shuttle was about a quarter the size at 559.1 cubic meters. That external tank took just under 3 hours to fill. Musk says they're going to fill a tank 4 times the size in 1/6 the time, an improvement factor of 24. We're not even going to state how audacious that seems. That is going to be up to SpaceX to prove this highly dubious claim at the launch pad and again on their converted floating oil rigs Phobos and Deimos, which come up during the Q&A. If they can pull it off, then the smaller propellant tanks will obviously be a much lesser concern. That takes care of the propellant argument, but the turnaround times are equally ridiculous. Musk thinks...
Yeah, no, they are. They are ridiculous. I don't think Super Heavy... Again, that's why he said theoretically. That's why I think it's not realistically it will take this long. It's theoretically it could take this long. So that I think is aimed at investors and fanboys, because I don't think anyone actually thinks that's going to happen. Yeah.
The booster will be able to fly every hour, meaning if they can get the propellant loads squared away in 30 minutes, flight techs and engineers will only have another 30 minutes to look the craft over before quickly evacuating the pad. Again, the likelihood of that being a sufficiently thorough safety inspection of a recently flown vehicle seems unlikely, especially when the quickest turnaround to date on a Falcon reusable booster, a much smaller vehicle, is 27 days. Musk made this statement fairly early on in the presentation to pull at your heartstrings.
Ultimately, even go beyond the solar system and bring life with us. The creatures that we love can't build spaceships, but we can, and we can bring them with us. And I think that's pretty important, you know.
No, you can't do that. You can't bring animals with you.
For those that care about the environment and care about all the creatures on Earth.
Well, this is very, very relevant to Starship.
We've gone over the logistics of taking animals into space, especially in the absence of gravity.
If you're going to take livestock with you, you're going to need some form of artificial gravity.
We did this in episode 9 called Viewers' Questions, where we broke down what it would take to bring a flock of chickens, and we also dove into the reality of...
Yeah, you can't bring chickens with you. I don't know if it's chickens specifically, because most birds can't swallow without gravity. So you would definitely need artificial gravity if you wanted to bring a poultry with you.
Raising insects for protein. Another segment dealt with aquaponics and the difficulties that astronauts would face trying to bring live fish along for the trip. Long story short, and not to spoil the episodes for you, but animals don't make out any better in microgravity than humans do. As
arguably animals are worse off in microgravity than humans are, and we're not fantastic.
We do, they also lose bone density and muscle mass, and in regards to birds especially, they can't even eat or drink without assistance from gravity. So the chances of Starship acting as some sort of Noah's Ark between worlds is pretty much going to be the same as the number of eggs ever laid by birds brought to the ISS. That would be none. For anyone hoping for any further details on upcoming Starship missions, all Musk said in that regard was a reminder that they are planning to use Starship to launch Starlink version 2, which Musk announced in November of 2021 was crucial to that program and SpaceX in avoiding bankruptcy. He gave us a reminder that Dear Moon was apparently still a thing, and that Starship was selected for the HLS. No updates, no timelines, no other information, other than he also said there were future announcements on the horizon that people will be fired up about.
Yay, Polaris. Yeah, no, Polaris was probably at least one of the future announcements he was referring to, and that is very cool. I don't want to predict anything or really guess anything. I'll say I would like it if the second Polaris mission was a crewed rendezvous with an HLS version of Starship, but I don't think that's going to be for some time, a year at least, because I mean, Elon did basically say in the Q&A section that they haven't been working on life support systems at all. So that's not great for HLS, and I hope that they have.
So far as we're concerned, this system is nowhere near where it needs to be in provability to be taking contracts or deposits on any other mission. Anybody buying into this unproven system right now would be fools to do so.
Doesn't New Glenn and Vulcan also have contracts and customers already? Neither of those have flown to orbit. They're both unproven. Do you know, as a reply to that chat message, I was thinking of doing a sort of ramble, unscripted style, semi-scripted style video on the first Polaris thing, because I saw on Twitter, I think it was Tony Bella who did the concept of having a Soyuz-style orbital module that Dragon would bring up in the trunk and dock to, and they could use that as an airlock, which I think is a really, really interesting idea. Because it's obvious that Crew Dragon does have additional payload capacity to it. It would the airlock would have to be attached attached to the second stage rather than attached to the trunk itself because of abort modes. It needs the thrust to weight ratio, as much thrust to ratio as it can get. So it's an interesting concept. I could ramble on about that for a bit, I think, and turn that into a video. But Polaris is, I mean, I gotta say, I'm very skeptical about Polaris, the third Polaris mission, because that's meant to be a crewed launch, orbit, and landing of Starship. So I think that's quite far down the line.
At this point in the presentation, Musk goes into some detail about why SpaceX came to the Boca Chica area. In his words,
So why Starbase? Why here? We kind of needed a confluence of factors. So the closer you are to the equator, the more of a boost from Earth rotation that you get. So you want to be as south as possible and launch eastward. And then, it's always possible that something goes wrong. But you want several miles around the launch site to be unpopulated or at least clearable. It's basically here and Cape Canaveral or Cape Kennedy is where are the other two possibilities.
there are 2 points in the continental U.S. that are suitable for launches as the southernmost tip of a state. On the water, they can launch east to take advantage of the rotation of the Earth: Boca Chica, Texas, and Kennedy Space Center, Florida. Kennedy Space Center launch pads are spread across a wide swath of land purchased for this purpose at the very beginning of the American space program. The lands between facilities have since been established as the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, which is actively monitored by the Fish and Wildlife Service. The closest civilian population to Pad 39A lives in Titusville, Florida, which is 20 kilometers away. Spaceport, Texas, on the other hand, sits smack dab in the middle of 4 pre-established protected nature reserves, turtle beaches, and state parks. Environmentalists monitoring this important bird migration corridor are forbidden to access these areas to do their research when SpaceX closes State Highway 4. The closest civilian population to the Starship launch tower lives in what remains of Boca Chica Village, where Musk claims to have his primary residence, and it's only 3 kilometers away.
Where I live, by the way, it's my primary residence, is that little village over there.
The larger community of South Padre Island sits only 8 kilometers to the north, and the Mexican border is a mere 4 kilometers to the south. Musk apparently thinks that these delicate nature preserves, home to dozens of endangered and critically endangered animals and plants, are there to be his buffer zone against catastrophic events at Spaceport. And he would prefer to risk this area for his personal gain rather than move his operation to Florida, where he would enjoy a safety margin 7 times greater than that in Boca Chica.
I believe that they are moving to Florida. I thought that the whole spiel was Boca was R&D and testing new things, which is what they have been doing, and Kennedy is more for operational and crewed launches, more regular.
Musk went into some detail about the differences between Raptor 1 and Raptor 2. He put up a frame showing one beside the other and mentioned how the Raptor 2, the one on the right, was far less complex than the Raptor 1 on the left. And given that most people were watching this presentation on a screen from a distance, that may have well convinced them. However, looking at this photo, we're not convinced at all. Look it over and compare the 2 units. What he calls Raptor 2 is indeed far less complex on appearance, but there's nothing on that unit that isn't also on the other. Look at the bell, look at the larger plumbing pieces, even the height, and the way they're secured to the pallet, all identical. One noticeable difference between them would be the top-mounted feed to the turbo pump and the piping associated with that are missing, which makes the top a much cleaner appearance and takes away a bunch of clutter.
Yes, that is true, and that's something that it's obvious to notice. I don't think it's any more malicious than they tried to make it look better.
Maybe we're wrong, but it's not likely. It's more likely that you're simply looking at a stripped down or partially assembled Raptor 1.
Yeah, I'm saying, fuck. Someone, okay. There are a lot of people in the community who are more, they follow Raptor development more, and there's some people that have literally 3D modeled every single pipe. So they would have a much better idea of what this component is. I mean, maybe someone in chat might. I believe it might have something to do with the LOX turbo pump, but I don't know. But yeah, I guess we'll see. We're only going to get more Raptor 2s, so we shall see.
Rather than something that has supposedly been completely re-engineered from scratch. We'll get to that point in a bit during the Q&A. After rereading his Redux version of his 2019 presentation script, Musk opened up the floor to the audience for a question and answer period. We're going to show you the people who asked the questions with some familiar faces in the bunch. Then we'll give Musk's most concise answer without all the ums and ahs and pregnant pauses. We've edited those out. Finally,
I really like making fun of people that have stutters. That's really cool.
for each one, we'll interpret the answer if necessary, including whether or not Musk actually answered the question at all. Before we get going, apologies in advance for the crappy, uneven audio. Whether or not Musk has his arms crossed across his lavalier mic has a lot to do with how he sounds, and they needed a better dual diversity microphone for the people asking questions. Here we go with question number 1.
I believe you're expecting to hear in a couple weeks about the possible finding of no significant impact from the FAA. Have you gotten any indications if that's going to come through, and what is your time frame for the orbital flight test? Thanks.
We don't have a ton of insight into where things stand with the FAA. We have gotten sort of a rough indication that there may be an approval in March, but that's all we know.
So Musk didn't give any indication that a FONSI is imminent, saying only there's a slight chance of a finding or approval in March. Nothing really to add to this statement at this time. However, he did not answer her question about the timeline for the first orbital flight.
Mark?
That's because there's no way to know the timeline for the orbital flight without knowing when the environmental review is going to come back. So that question kind of answers itself. Yeah.
Survey. Can you talk about the point-to-point capability? Is there a possibility?
Dude, I fucking cringed so hard when this person. There were about 3 good questions in this whole Q&A section. So yeah, I wasn't listening for a lot of it because as soon as this dude says point to point, I'm just zoned out.
Between here and Cape Canaveral?
There are some scenarios where it might actually be the lowest cost means of transporting cargo long distances. Now, this would really be more for, if you're going like, I don't know, a quarter or a third or halfway around the world. But in a rocket, it would be less than an hour. So like 45 minutes or thereabouts. So that means you'd be able to use the rocket 20 times more often than an aircraft. So it's 20 times the capital efficiency. There is a scenario where it's economically compelling to do long distance cargo and people transport with Starship. Basically, nothing's faster than an ICBM.
Musk changes gears with this question to pitch the point-to-point residual capability as described by Gwen Shotwell a couple years back at her TED Talk.
4 years back.
Musk claimed that a Starship would be able to fly...
Oh, sorry, for reference, I should say 4 years back in 2018, SpaceX was still planning to reuse the second stage. That's how long ago in their development cycle it was.
20 times a day because it can get halfway around the world in half an hour demonstrates how ridiculous this concept is. For anyone wondering why point-to-point delivery systems with Starship is not going to be a thing, check out our Starship Episode 8, Point-to-Point, which deals with human transit by rocket and logistics and environmental damage of operating a launch system at sea. And Episode 16, Debunking Point-to-Point, which deals with the transfer of logistical goods to disaster zones through the military. Those 2 episodes, in combination, cover pretty much every aspect of both systems, and the futility of the suggestion. Oh, and the next time some muskrat takes offense to anyone calling Starship an ICBM, show them this clip to shut them up.
Basically, nothing's faster than, an ICBM.
It's fine. Hi, Elon. Michael Sheets with CNBC. You opened this presentation by addressing a little bit of the criticism that's been aimed at space travel.
With point-to-point, I don't think it will go any farther than a demonstration for the Air Force or Army or Space Force or whatever. Like, the U.S. military is the U.S. military. If they want something, if they see a potential advantage, they will put money towards it and see if it's feasible. I don't think it will be, but who knows?
Being seen as maybe a pet project or problems here on Earth. I was wondering if you get a little more into the specifics on comparing not just the U.S. government spending that's happening on space travel versus other things, but maybe in terms of SpaceX itself, how you and private investment on a dollar value compares to the taxpayer-funded projects or contracts that SpaceX has won over the years.
The cost efficiency of SpaceX is the best in history, I think, for any rocket development. And we are talking about a rocket that's more than twice the mass and thrust of a Saturn V, and also designed to be fully reusable, which is obviously also much better from an environmental standpoint to have a fully reusable rocket, for a development cost that is between 5 and 10% of Saturn V. Because we need to make it work, so it's not worked yet.
Okay, this is purely from memory. I could be completely fucking wrong. I think adjusted for inflation, Saturn V was what, $60 billion for development? So $3 to $6 billion for development of that is pretty impressive.
But it will work. This is I don't know, at least an order of magnitude, maybe 2 orders of magnitude more efficient than anything in the past.
Musk compares the development cost of Starship against the development cost of Saturn V, which is the largest rocket to make it to orbit, and it did so repeatedly. As Musk even pointed out, Starship doesn't work yet, so running any cost comparison of this system under development against a successful system created 6 decades ago makes no sense. In the day,
it makes some
overall
sense.
Project cost of Saturn V was $6.417 billion,
okay. Let's see if I was
which
right.
translates to about $50 billion in today's dollars. However,
yeah, close enough.
that program yielded 15 rockets, 13 of which were launched, all of which were self-contained and capable of conducting missions to the moon by themselves without additional fuel or supplies transferred to them in orbit. That's a price tag per mission of $3.3 billion, including launch cost, since the $50 billion is a total cost of the program from birth to abortion. Musk claimed that they are developing Starship using only 5 to 10% of this budget. To be factual, would mean that the entire Starship program will produce and launch mission-capable, human-rated ships for between $167 million and $335 million per piece. In comparison to these numbers, take the cost of a must-have piece of equipment on every crewed vehicle, except apparently on a Crew Dragon. The newest version of the space toilet as recently
They have a shitter on the toilet, dude. Come on. There is a toilet on Crew Dragon.
installed aboard the ISS at a cost of $23 million. How many toilets do you think a crew of 100 is going to need? Then after they're installed, how much money is going to be left over to build the rest of the ship? Now Musk has this thing where he likes to say a bunch of catchphrases to sound smart. Things like function to zero or high probability. And his favorite seems to be order of magnitude, such as he uses here.
This is I don't know, at least an order of magnitude, maybe 2 orders of magnitude more efficient than anything in the past.
If math wasn't your strong suit in high school or college, that term might not mean anything particular to you. But it does have a mathematical definition, as shown here. N equals A times 10 to the power of B. This is an approximation of logarithm value, where B represents the order of magnitude in this equation. N equals A when the order of magnitude is 0, since 10 to the power of 0 is 1. N equals 10A when the order of magnitude is 1. And N equals 100A when the order of magnitude is 2. So when something is said to be 2 orders of magnitude better, it means it is 100 times better or bigger than what it is being compared to. Inversely, that means the comparable registers at only 1%. And there is no chance in hell Musk is going to produce and launch workable, crew-rated Starship mission systems for 1 penny on a Saturn V. So the next time you hear anyone say this phrase trying to sound smart, you can call them on their bullshit. And you can start with Musk using it in this
You're not allowed to use figures of speech, because otherwise you're a fake genius.
nonsensical context from the same presentation.
I don't know exactly what that tonnage is, but I suspect it is at least, if one tries to get the right order of magnitude, about 1 million tons.
Hey, Elon, this is Joey Roulette for Supercluster. Just wondering, what does SpaceX's plan and timeline look like if the FAA ultimately decides to do a deeper.
And yes, he is using the Blue Ocean infographic as a source. I'm pretty sure the NASA HLS document has something on refueling numbers. Yeah.
Environmental review of Starbase, and then one other thing, you might be able to give us an updated figure on what it costs to Starship and what it would cost a customer to buy a flight on one. Thanks.
I am optimistic that we will get approval. Objectively, I think this is not something that will be harmful to the environment. We've obviously flown the ship several times and done multiple landings and takeoffs and landings. We've fired the engines a lot. So the reality is that it would not have a significant impact. Now, of course, that doesn't mean things don't get delayed from a regulatory standpoint. And we are in a litigious society, and so there's always sort of lawsuits from someone, lawsuit city. So I guess our worst case scenario is that we would, be delayed for 6 to 8 months to build up the Cape launch tower and launch from there.
First off, apologies for not catching this guy's name. We'd be happy to add your name to the video description if you provide it. Anyway, Musk said...
Wait, okay, no, this is important. Listen closely, all right?
Cape launch tower and launch from there.
First off, apologies for not catching this guy's name. We'd be happy to add your name to the video description if you provide it.
So he knows that you can edit video descriptions. So why hasn't he fucking corrected himself on all the bullshit mistakes he made? Even the obvious ones, like the Starlink article that he completely fucking edited. It's ridiculous.
Anyway, Musk says he's optimistic about getting approval, stating that the launches are not harmful to the local environment, which is certainly not the case according to the most recent wildlife and nesting assessments in the area, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, who the FAA expected to rubber stamp this assessment, is now getting very involved in this process, while the FAA continues their deliberations. Musk says their backup plan, if they don't get approval, is moving everything to Cape Canaveral, since they received approval from the FAA several years ago, he claims, to launch from Kennedy's Pad 39A. There's a very interesting point that Musk makes here, and it could very well bite him in the ass on the DPEA as well. As part of these environmental reviews, alternative sites that are located in less fragile ecosystems need to be investigated. And right in this answer, Musk states that if they don't get approval here in Boca Chica, it would only take them 6 to 8 months to replicate the entire operation in Cape Canaveral, where Musk says they already have environmental reviews approved. Meaning, Pad 39A at Cape Canaveral is a more viable and more...
No, not 39A. 39A is staying for, was it? Yeah, no, it is Falcon Heavy. 39A is staying for Falcon Heavy and Crew Dragon launches. Does he not know that they want to build a new pad? I mean, I guess not.
Reasonable location for these operations, and that the application to Boca Chica could and should be declined on that basis. Judging from Musk's comment about being in a litigious society, Musk is probably aware of at least some of the lawsuits being prepared in case the FAA gives the green light to this operation. One way or the other, this is not going to be the end of it. On a cost per flight question, the numbers coming from Musk are absolute nonsense.
Costs will improve significantly over time. It may be as little as a few $1 million per flight. Maybe even as low as $1 million per flight. Depending on what our launch rate is, we have to divide the fixed cost by the number of launches. So the more launches that happen, the lower the total cost, fully considered cost per flight would be. I think it's highly likely to be everything included, less than $10 million a flight for 100-ton to orbit capability.
A couple $1 million per flight, maybe down to $1 million plus fixed cost of around $9 million for a $10 million total all in, including launch cost? If that is the case, what is the excuse for Falcon launches still starting at $62 million for a new unit?
Market competition is the reason. It's already the lowest price on the market for most applications, especially the 8 to 15 ton launch market. Yeah, exactly. Cost isn't price. Like, why would they charge Why would they charge? Why would they purposefully reduce their profit margin?
What is the excuse for Falcon launches still starting at $62 million for a new unit? And why was their aspirational cost announced at $5 to $6 million years ago?
That was cost. That was what they were hoping for internally, I believe. I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure if this was cost. Yeah, it's saying costs. Oh yeah, and also this was when they were planning to reuse all of Falcon 9, so that was including second stage, and including fairings as well.
Go.
None of these details added up at all.
Oh my god, it's my favorite comedian in the world, Dave Chappelle. I love him. He's very cool. He said some very nice things about trans people. And give me one moment. This was pretty good. I really liked it when he did this. This is probably his best gamer moment.
Hi, this is Andrea Leinfelder of the Houston Chronicle. I wanted to know, when and how do you plan to test Starship refueling in space? And also, aside from NASA, Dear Moon, and Starlink, can you elaborate on the potential customer base for Starship? Thank you.
Man thinks about question.
I apologize. I zoned out for a second. I was just thinking about something. Could you say that question again?
When and how do you plan to test Starship refueling in space? Yeah. And aside from NASA, Dear Moon, and Starlink, can you elaborate on potential customers for Starship? Thank you.
I optimistically, towards the end of next year, I think I'd be surprised if it's longer than 2 years for doing the refilling. And there are a lot of additional customers that will want to use Starship. I don't want to steal their thunder. They're going to make their announcements. You know, once we make this work, it's an utterly profound breakthrough in access to orbit. And when you have an utterly profound breakthrough, the use cases will be hard to imagine.
So, in order, Musk thinks they will have this refilling system up and able to test in 1, maybe 2 years, which does not bode well for the Dear Moon 2020.
Well, no, he said... Oh, I hate doing this. I hate pausing and saying, well, actually. But, well, actually, he said, surprised if it would take longer than 2 years, which I think is realistic. It's disappointing, don't get me wrong, but I think that's pretty realistic.
3 mission that will rely on this technology. Then Musk alludes to other customers about to announce some sort of connection to Starship, but he doesn't name any of them.
Polaris was one of those.
He goes on to suggest that this will be such a profound breakthrough that you can't even imagine all the use cases. However, at this point in time, any other customers signing up with Starship have no working prototype to consider when shopping for an orbital delivery system.
Hi, Elon. This is Steve Clark with the Brownsville Herald. Thank you for the presentation. So if the FAA does come back and say we need an EIS, does Starbase bounce back from that at some point?
I mean, it would obviously set us back for quite some time, because an EIS takes a lot longer than an EA. So we would have to shift our priorities to Cape Kennedy.
Okay, and long term, what do you envision for Starbase? Like a spaceport with flights coming and going and Starship manufacturing, or what is the future role of Starbase?
It's well suited to be kind of like our advanced R&D location. So it's like where we would try out new designs and new versions of the rocket. And then I think probably Cape Kennedy would be our sort of main operational launch site. We'll have floating spaceports, like ocean spaceports. We've got these 2 converted oil rigs that are going to be turned into orbital launch sites. Because the rocket is quite loud, you want to be, I don't know, 20 miles away from a major city or 30 miles away from a major city, just so you don't, disturbing people too much. So like maybe located like 20 miles, 30 miles offshore. I think people are willing to, have something that's loud occasionally, but if you want to have it frequently, then it probably needs to be offshore.
Musk starts off by saying that if they don't get approval, it will be a setback that will force them to shift towards Cape Canaveral. And on Steve's second question, things get interesting. The question again was, what do you envision for Starbase? Musk's answer to this question does not mesh at all with the DPEA that the FAA is in the process of reviewing. Musk says Boca Chica is well suited to becoming their hub for R&D for new vehicles. Historically speaking, they've used what they've called iterative design, a process that has blown up far more vehicles than it landed. SpaceX's current DPEA was not for a destructive testing rocket range. It was for an expansion of their launch schedule for ships to orbit and the associated infrastructure required to facilitate those operations, including a 250 megawatt gas-fired electricity generation.
That is true, because they already have the approval to test suborbital, test reusable vehicles.
Station. Musk continues on about their 2 converted oil rigs that will have to be located, he says, 20 to 30 miles offshore so as not to bother people too badly or too often. 20 to 30 miles is 32 to 48 kilometers, and remember, South Padre Island is only 8 kilometers away from the only current Starship launch platform. Boca Chica Village is only 3 kilometers away.
Hello, Elon. I'm Cam Gerlach with the SpaceX Reddit community.
This dude looks like a Redditor.
Talked a lot about how Raptor 2 is crucially important for Starship development and for the future of Starship. So I'm curious, what general improvements have you made with Raptor 2 to ensure it's not only more efficient and more powerful, but also much easier to produce and less expensive as well and faster? And how do you plan to continue to iterate further on the design in the future?
Raptor 2 is an almost complete redesign relative to Raptor 1. Basically everything's been redesigned. You can see the difference over there, the Raptor 1 versus Raptor 2. A lot of the changes were deleting things. We deleted a lot, consolidated a lot. The rotating machinery, especially the inducers of the turbo pumps, are a lot more robust. Welded joints instead of flanges was pretty helpful. With a bit more deletion and integration, I think the engine will be sort of flame-proof, more or less, and then we can get rid of the shrouds, which would be a big mass savings.
Now remember when we pointed out the frame depicting Raptor 1 versus Raptor 2? Musk is saying in this reply that 2 is a complete redesign from 1. He does say that a lot of the new design came from deleting things. They deleted a lot and consolidated a lot. They replaced flanges and seals with welds. That may all be true, but that would not explain a jump from 185 tons force to 230 tons force in a machine that appears to still occupy the same physical footprint. We're going to stick a pin in the Raptors for a second and come back to them shortly.
So in terms of optimizing and advancing designs, this isn't a huge jump. Like if you look at early versions of basically any single rocket engine. The thrust from the earliest version, from the thrust to the newest version, is again, it's a jump like this, and it's the same with ISP.
Footprint. We're going to stick a pin in the Raptors for a second and come back to them shortly.
Chris Gephardt with NASA Spaceflight. Can you talk a little bit about the abort modes that are available for ship if there were ever to be a problem during the climb to orbit?
And yes, those last two messages in chat are very, very accurate. I'm just going to bring up the... I'll use the Merlin engine as an example. Not the Rolls-Royce Merlin. I always fucking do that. I just search up Merlin engine and I assume Google knows I'm talking... I assume Merlin knows I was talking about the rocket engine. Okay, Merlin 1A. Wasn't that an ablasive? Yeah. It was a composite nozzle, ablasive composite nozzle. So 340 kilonewtons. And we'll go to the 1D. Where are we? Oh. 690 in vacuum. That's a decent increase. That's a little bit of a decent. Where's the thrust and vacuum? Okay, so here's a confirmed vacuum thrust. So from 420 kilonewtons to 6. Oh, for fuck's sake! It's the funny numbers. Did they do that on purpose? It's the funny numbers. 690 kilonewtons from an engine that initially produced in vacuum 420 kilonewtons. Yeah.
What would be available to the crew in that regard, and also on that same level, the life support systems for ship. Where do those stand, and what are the challenges that you're finding with just the sheer volume in Starship for that? Thank you.
Starship will not have an independent abort system, but I think something that would make sense is to have the thruster weight of the ship be enough that it could do it could take off from the booster, even if the booster has a failure at the pad level. So kind of a launch abort capability with the ship, even if you lost an engine. That'd be my recommendation. We could scale up the life support system in Dragon. That would certainly be an option, and that would work for missions that are, say, a week or 2 weeks. That would be fine. For missions to Mars, you'd want a life support system that is renewable. So it's essentially recycling everything in a closed loop system with close to zero lost mass.
And there you have it. Starship has no independent abort mode. Musk just said so. If that remains the case, it's unlikely Starship will become human-rated. He said something that would make sense would be to give Starship Stage the ability to launch away from the booster even at pad level. That seems highly unlikely to be a viable solution for a disaster scenario. If anything goes wrong with the booster, the humans in the craft will have mere seconds to get clear of the Super Heavy before it explodes. And detonation velocity of methane is 1800 meters per second, or in excess of Mach 5. Launch escape systems typically use a tractor rocket to yank the crewed capsule clear of danger. Some, like the Crew Dragon, use pusher rockets to do the same thing. But if you compare a tractor rocket pulling a capsule away to the amount of time it takes for an empty Starship test article to lift off the ground...
Oh, come on, dude. He's comparing oranges to rocks here.
Once the engines are lit, there is no comparison.
Of course there's no comparison. That has 3 engines. The version he's talking about would have 9 total.
To lift off the ground once the engines are lit, there is no comparison.
Dude, yeah, no, that's just painful.
Musk is under the impression that the life support systems they have for the Crew Dragon, with an interior volume of 9.3 cubic meters, can simply be scaled up to accommodate a pressurized volume of 1,000 cubic meters. The difference between these systems is night and day, with Crew Dragon clocking in at a mere 1% of the Starship interior volume. That's akin to saying your window-mounted AC unit in your apartment is capable of cooling down the entire building, you just have to scale it. And that's obviously not what happens. To cool down the entire building, you either have to give each apartment its own AC unit, or
Yeah, is that not a form of scaling it?
go with an industrial system that's more
Yeah, a scaled system. What are you
energy efficient and centralized to take care of the building. The short answer here is, obviously, they have not started looking at life support systems for Starship yet. If they had, Musk would have been able to provide better answers. Also, they wouldn't still be looking for a chief engineer to tackle this problem, and according to the job description, take ownership of this project and design it from the ground up. If this is your area of expertise and you're thinking about applying for the job, plan on working evenings and weekends until you have the whole thing worked out for them. Good luck.
Hi, Elon. Eric Berger with Ars Technica. Thanks for taking some questions. I'm wondering if you do get that approval from the FAA in March. I know that there's really no way of knowing, but could you talk a little bit about the hardware readiness, sort of where you are technically? You know, the launch tower is pretty incredible, but sort of the rocket, the ground systems, software. Like if you were to get some kind of approval from the FAA in March, you know, would you be looking at, you know, how quickly could the hardware be ready to go?
I think we're tracking to have the regulatory approval and hardware readiness around the same time. Around the same, you know, hopefully, you know, basically a couple months for both. Yeah.
Eric must be pretty choked with the answer that Musk gave him. Oh, we'll probably have it ready about the same time. Have what ready? About what time? He pretty much just blew him off.
Hi, Seth Krakowski with SpaceExport.com. You mentioned launching from the sea. Could you give us an update on the current status of using Phobos and Deimos for Starship operations?
Yeah, so Phobos and Deimos thus far have been a relatively low priority. We needed to make the launch site here work. This has been, you know, quite a difficult endeavor. So we deprioritized the Phobos and Deimos. We're going to take one of them and build at least a catch tower on it. So, and ultimately we will, ultimately meaning like, I don't know, later this year, build a full launch capability on one of the platforms. So I think hopefully by the end of this year we will have a launch capability at Cape Kennedy at 39A and on one of the ocean platforms as well.
So a little bit earlier, Musk was saying how they were converting these oil rigs to become launch platforms. Now he's saying that they have not been a priority, that they haven't been worked on.
No. Dude. No. What he said makes sense. He said that they were deprioritized because they wanted to get the launch tower at Boca built.
That they haven't been outfitted for launches. But maybe by the end of this year, one of them might be ready to go as a launch platform with a catch tower. Seeing as how there's no chance such a platform would be allowed to operate without another full environmental assessment, and that assessment can't really start until they have a concept to show the FAA, including the logistical framework for hauling supplies, personnel, propellant, and vehicles to the platform, never mind how the platform would be powered. Smart money is on these platforms staying parked at shore for many years to come.
Tim Dodd, the Everyday Astronaut here. Okay, so a little bit more Raptor 2 talk again. Where are you at as far as production? How many do you have? How are they handling, testing? Are they more cantankerous, less cantankerous? Just give us a little more rundown, like on where you're actually at. Is that a bottleneck for the next booster as well? We assume the next booster is going to require, Raptor 2. So, kind of where are you at with the production and the testing so far?
The only remaining issue that we're aware of is melting the chamber. So, that thing really wants to melt. It's looking positive, but that's the remaining issue is melting the chamber. But in the meantime, we're scaling up old production to get to one a day or better. Next week we'll probably make at least 5 or 6 Raptor 2s.
Here's where we pull the pin out on the Raptor discussion for the second time. Musk identifies the biggest issue with Raptor 2 development being the engine design wants to melt the chamber despite the flow of cryogenics in and around the engine meant to keep it cool. So just maybe all those deletions and consolidations he was talking about weren't such a good idea after all.
Well, no, because that was an issue with V1 as well. And we saw that on the flight models.
However, if the Raptor 2s are melting, the short strokes here are, they have no workable engine yet. If they have no engine, they have no rocket. If they have no rocket, why do they keep promising their first orbital launch test next month?
Because that's a very, very reductionist way of looking at it. They have V1. They're not using V2 for the first orbital. They're not using V2 for the first orbital launch.
If single Raptor 2 engines are becoming molten slag on the test stand, how do they plan on keeping cool in the center of a cluster of 32 other engines firing at the same time on Super Heavy and putting out similar amounts of heat?
Regeneratively cooled nozzles.
Then Musk says they're scaling up production of these unsolved engines to produce one Raptor 2 engine per day, which defies reason. Why would you continue pumping out these units when you know this issue exists and needs to be remedied before you have any chance of passing the testing phase?
I think it's because they have the ability to push the engines to breaking point, so they're not reaching the chamber pressure that they want before the chamber starts melting. Yeah, no, that was a really stupid argument. But that doesn't mean the engine is not functional. Because if they run it lower than what they would have liked, it still works.
It sounds like they need to go back to the drawing board, because proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance. Learn it, live it, love it. Finally, to wrap up the Raptors, after all of Elon's bluster about maxing the engines out to get 250 tons force out of them, even though they're already melting down, reminded us of another recent presentation from a different CEO.
Now, no! It's Peter, please, my boy. Don't bring Peter into this. No. Oh, also, it's worth noting that Common Sense Skeptic has said he owns stock in Rocket Lab. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Because we don't have to lift a great big hulking metal rocket into orbit, it means the engines can be far less stressed. We don't need to push the engines to their absolute maximum.
Hi, Elon. Robert Perlman with Space.com and Collect Space. You mentioned the NASA contract for the human landing system. At one point, do you envision splintering off development of Starship for HLS, or how are you going to balance the timelines of rapid reusability versus NASA's own schedule of when they're ready to go to the moon?
I don't think there's really a conflict there. You know, adding legs to land on the moon, we do not think is like that can be done pretty quickly. A high production rate solves many ills, so we're aiming for a high production rate.
Not much to interpret here from the question that was asked. Musk doesn't see a conflict between what he's doing and getting ready for HLS. But then he says something that really doesn't make sense. He says a high production rate solves many ills. Well, not if what you're producing is crap. See the Tesla Model 3. A well-known saying that contradicts this completely is quality over quantity. These are always inversely related. Another saying related to this statement, good, cheap, fast, but you can only pick two.
Hi, Lauren Grush with The Verge. I'm wondering if you can clarify the number of launches that you plan to conduct in order to do these refillings. I know a lot of numbers have been thrown around, so I'm wondering if you have landed on a final number, and how quickly do you plan to launch those missions back?
For HLS, they could probably just use, as a hodgepodge, they could literally just use Falcon landing legs.
Back to refuel the vehicle to get to the moon. Thanks.
The missions would happen pretty fast for refilling the vehicle to minimize boil off of the cryogenic propellants, but would probably be launching every few hours.
Here we go again with a launch every few hours. That's not what the DPEA stated. They were proposing 20 suborbital Starship launches at a rate of about 2 per month, with 5 additional Starship Super...
Yeah, but that's nothing of what's been said about Kennedy. Kennedy does not have this limitation.
Heavy combos to orbit. This is right from their own DPEA. Now, while it does say that there could be multiple launches in quick succession to support a single mission, a single fully fueled mission craft for HLS...
This is like the third time he's shown this Blue Origin infographic.
example, would require more launches than this.
Hi, Elon. Kevin Haymeyer from Space Eccentric on YouTube and Rumble.
Fuck this dude.
Thank you. My viewers are really hungry to know anything about the interior design for crewed Starship. You have HLS, you have Deer Moon, and last we heard, maybe a year or two ago, you were looking to hire Tesla employees to design the interior for Starship. How's that going?
We aren't focusing a lot on the interior quite yet. I mean, that will be important down the road, but our focus right now is just getting to orbit and proving out return of the booster and return of the ship.
Musk explains that the interior of Starship is not a priority right now, but for every other aerospace launch provider, that's where they start. You determine the
That
mission
is not true. No.
parameters, which dictates how many crew are needed, which guides the design of the ship, and then their requirements guide how much cargo you're bringing along to complete the mission. When it's all added up, if you can't figure out how to launch that much mass, you scale back a combination of personnel and resources until you can safely launch the mission. Haymeyer mentioned that Musk was going to hire people from Tesla to come up with the interior design, and somehow that just doesn't seem like a really great idea.
We're standing on the southern tip of the state of Texas. We're a few hundred yards from your residence. Could you just speak to what, if anything, has been appealing or advantageous about operating in the state of Texas versus other parts of the country?
You know, something that just happens over time with societies is that kind of rules and regulations build up, and they build up, more in some places than others. I think Texas has the right amount of rules and regulations. Yeah.
There you have it. Musk came to Texas because they have the right amount of rules and regulations, which is to say far fewer than many other states in the country. That wraps up the question and answer section, and of course,
was that it?
Still very few answers about this vehicle in general. We posted this frame on Twitter in the days leading up to the presentation, hoping for answers to all or any of the points listed, but of course we were disappointed because not one of them was addressed. Yet there was still a lot to take away from the lack of information. The more we cut the presentation apart, the more pieces we were able to put back together, and we came to an interesting conclusion as we got closer to wrapping this up. On this frame, the last point suspected that Musk would make some sort of call to action for his followers to plead his case to the FAA. As he has a tendency of doing on Twitter, sending his loyal fans against regulators or government officials he takes issue with to get his way. And at first glance, it seemed he didn't do that. But after watching this episode over and over again to glean facts and sound bites, we realized that was not the case. Musk did speak out against the FAA probably a dozen times in total, stating that if the FAA didn't give Starship the green light, that he was going to take this facility away from Boca Chica and start from scratch in Florida. Mentioning it once is one thing, but repeating it as often as he did becomes a passive-aggressive stance against the FAA and their processes that are still underway. But in doing so, Musk proved to the FAA that there is a very viable alternative to growing out operations in Boca Chica, and that it would only set him back 6 to 8 months, as we pointed out during the episode. The statements that Musk made during this presentation may very well be why the FAA written report that was due out on February 28th has now been pushed again to March 28th of 2022, and that delay was announced the day after this Redux presentation.
Yeah.
Now, at the beginning of this episode, we mentioned the new video that Musk had made for him, but all of these videos are the same. The one in 2019 was pretty much identical, except it had one launch tower instead of two. The one that depicted ITS in 2016 was an identical plotline featuring the design of the day.
That's what does he mean plotline? They featured an identical plotline. Yeah, it's because the mission profile is largely the same.
We already pointed out the different refilling paradigm, and the tower, and the new city waiting for the travelers on Mars. So about the only other thing worth mentioning in the 2022 version is that this vehicle still has that massive, expensive, ridiculous
No, they can't have
feature and
windows in their
assembly.
render.
And
They
we have
can't
not been able
do
to see
it.
the logic of that since our very first episode. So we're just going to wrap this up by saying, those of you that watched the 2019 presentation were probably experiencing deja vu for this one. And even if this was your first Starship presentation, you probably did not learn anything from it if you've already read the user's guide and skimmed their website. Regardless of which camp you fell into, you likely left with more questions than answers. We certainly did. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Common Sense.
Wait a minute. One moment.
vehicle still has. So about the only other thing worth mentioning in the tower and the new city waiting for the travelers on Mars.
Wrong video. I was watching History Buffs before I started streaming. Okay, here we go.
So about the only other thing worth mentioning in the 2022 version is that this vehicle still has that massive, expensive, ridiculous atrium window assembly. And we have not been able to see the logic of that since our very first episode. So we're just going to wrap this up by saying, those of you that watched the 2019 presentation were probably experiencing deja vu for this one. And even if this was your first Starship presentation, you probably did not learn anything from it if you've already read the user's guide and skimmed their website. Regardless of which camp you fell into, you likely left with more questions than answers. We certainly did. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Common Sense Skeptic, and for your support of our channel and community. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. If you like what we're doing, share it with your friends across social media. We are on Twitter if you'd like to follow us there, and if you're looking for a way to support us directly, we are live on Patreon. Before you leave, ring that notification bell so that you'll know when the Common Sense Skeptic returns.
This is just singular? Okay, yeah, it wasn't too bad. Yeah, honestly, all in all, that wasn't that bad. I mean, I don't know what I expected, but there wasn't anything super outrageous. How long did it take me to watch this? Okay, it took me 1:20 to watch an hour-long video. Nice. Okay, I think that wraps it up. It's a little bit late here, so I will probably leave.